Sam.
I'm Jack. Welcome to Dare to Talk.
Welcome. Yeah, we've got a very emotional, is probably the best way to describe it, episode.
Yeah,
which comes with a massive warning.
Yeah, I think we both agreed we didn't really want to do sort of a big intro in this. I think it's it's heavy going, but the story is something that needs to be told and needs to get out there.
Lucy Norfolk, she's just lost her husband. He died from cirrhosis of the liver.
Yeah. There was an article that went out locally, wasn't there?
Yeah.
In the Ipswich Star. That got quite a lot of...
Yeah, and then her life's just been a bit of a whirlwind ever since, and we're doing what we can to help. She wants to get the story out there, spread awareness. So I just spoke to her this weekend. We'd done this quite a while ago, but for one reason or another we haven't been able to get the intro together because we've both been very busy. But yeah, she was with the stars at the weekend. She took her kids up. She got invited to Callum Best, George Best's son, had a charity football match with other celebrities. She sent me some pictures of her and her kids and that there, which was nice for them.
Yeah.
And it's just nice that people are trying to help her and support her and the family.
Yeah.
She'll go into detail on here about how her daughter in particular and her son, obviously, they're not coping very well. Who would with their dad's passing? And she can't afford, which is a shock to me, because I would have thought that anyone losing a parent, and especially in the way they have, because they've watched him die for a while now essentially, but she can't afford the help that she needs. So that's why I've decided I want to set up I spoke to you about it as well. We both sort of decided I want to set up a Just Giving page for her. Yeah. And I'm not saying we're going to make loads of money. We might make a little bit of money, but I'm hoping that people can dig deep. I know stuff's expensive and cost of living's gone up and everything, but whatever people can give, and then maybe we might even be able to get her kids the help that they need and her essentially the help they need. But even if not, even if we just dig deep over Christmas and send them on a nice family holiday or something, that would be nice.
It'd be something.
They've been through a hell of a lot, and I think we can do something here to help them.
Anyone listening, it's a heavy story, but it's one that needs to be told. So enjoy the episode.
It's Dare to Talk. We've got Lucy today, and this isn't going to be an easy talk. Like this is it, but it is what it is. Do you know what I mean? I think you're very brave. We just spoke briefly. You've recently lost your husband.
Yes.
To cirrhosis of the liver.
Yeah.
And you've been doing bits with other people to spread awareness on the matter. And we asked you to come on and talk about what's been going on and help you spread that awareness.
Thank you.
That's all right. You're very, very sweet. We've had a chat in the kitchen and everything, got to know each other a bit better. I've spoke to you a few times recently on the phone, just checking in and seeing how you're doing and stuff. And you've been very, very brave and keeping your head above water, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, just about. You have to just keep going. There's
of course, nothing. Yeah. I saw your so you did your interview with Man Up, Dan from Man Up, and I know that's hit quite a few people saw that, and I think a lot of people were kind of touched by the story.
Yeah, I certainly was.
Yeah.
I watched it. I was going to be on the chat, but then Dan moved the time, and I had my daughter's training and everything. But I watched it in awe, and I shed a tear. But you wouldn't be surprised with that, would you, Jack?
No, not at all, Sam. I know you do get quite emotional.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people got emotional with
that.
And
I found it hard listening back to
my
voice. So.
Yeah, I think everyone does, though, don't they? But like we just said before we hit record, for anyone to go through something and use that negative in such a positive way like you're doing, I just admire you for it. So
thank you.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit in your own words of...
Well, when I met Dan, we were doing lots of acting at the time. He was an actor and he was doing amazing. He was so good on stage, and he was doing stand-up comedy, and he told me that after the gigs that he did, lots of people would buy him drinks, and they would. He didn't know when to stop, so I didn't know this when I first met him. I did not know he was alcoholic, but equally I didn't know what alcoholic was, so I didn't know what that meant at all. So I thought, oh, he drinks a bit, he can stop, that's not a major issue. So I obviously loved him from the second I met him. I wanted to go out with him. I wanted to make everything okay. I wanted to. I suppose I loved being in London with him, and I wanted to stay there. And I could see like our future together really. And then I found out that actually that he liked women. He liked going out. He liked getting drunk. He tended to use people to get the alcohol, and because he had to fund his addiction somehow. And that's how, when he met me, he was actually seeing 3 other people, and I didn't realise at the time. Anyway, I did after all. Yeah. When I found out, I said, right, that's it. I'm done with this relationship. This isn't going anywhere. Yeah. So I left him, and then a couple of weeks later, he got in contact. Said, please just meet me for a meal. I said, okay. So I went along because obviously I still liked him. Yeah. And so I went along, and we ended up together. He talked through what had happened. He then opened up about having the addiction, but he wasn't. I don't think he was aware of exactly how it was affecting him, how it affected other people around him. And he would he'd drink in the evenings. He said he was working at the time, and I got to know him over those few years anyway. He said, I'm going to sort my life out. Well, suddenly, because I got pregnant basically, he said, I'll sort my life out. I'm going to go and get a job, a proper job, and not acting, not all of that, because... So he went out, and he came back, and he said, I found a job in teaching. I'm going to go back. I'm going to teach. And so he started doing his teacher training, and he did actually manage to. He taught really, really well. He was an amazing teacher, and he'd come back from work, and he'd say he was just so focused on that. It was like he had a double life in a way at that point. He was getting home, drinking, then it was all up and down, going to work the next day, being okay, and coming back and drinking again. But it was only wine and beer and the usual going out after work, having a pint type thing. And he'd go out with some friends from work and come back, and then he said he needed some help. He couldn't sustain the alcohol, so we went to the doctor, and the doctor said, how much do you drink? He explained that he drank every night, he drank after work, and he checked him over. Said, your physical health, you're fine, there's nothing wrong, you don't need any help, we can't offer you help because you're not bad enough, you don't drink enough to say that you've got a problem with that. But he said he couldn't switch off at night time. He would lay in bed awake, and
so he was dependent on it.
Yeah, he would use the alcohol to go to sleep, and he would run me a bath and say, you go in the bathroom, you go and have a lovely relaxing bath. He'd put candles around, he'd make dinner, he would do all sorts of things but so that he could then go and secretly drink while I was out the way. And same with the children. He would kind of go, you go out, take them to the park for a bit.
To create that separation.
Business. Yeah. And so I would then take them to the park. But I knew what I found bottles of alcohol. I tried pouring away at that point. I was trying to, it's like you can't, and it caused arguments. I poured it away. He would shout at me, so you can't, that cost me money. I'd say, well, yeah, but you shouldn't be drinking. I don't want you to drink. I need you to stop it. Social services kind of, they came in, but they just said, oh, just don't drink around the children, that's fine. And I don't really know. There was other people called social services. The problem was that if I said anything to anybody, they would instantly try and help in some ways by calling, saying something, but it didn't always help. And they didn't really do anything. Then we decided to move house. I thought that would change everything for some reason. Let's go and move house to another house. I'd got pregnant again after the other child, my daughter, and we decided to have a fresh start. He stayed in the same job and he was doing well. He got promoted, but at that point to head of English and drama, and he was a really good teacher. And I felt if I said anything, I'd damage his career, and so he wanted everything hidden, really. And then he had a breakdown at work one day and called me and said, "Can you come and get me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And at that point was a massive turning point, really, that he admitted completely that he just couldn't continue doing what he was doing. He was trying to hide away and pretend he was okay when he wasn't. So I said to him, right, that's fine, we'll sort this out. You need some time off work. So he came back. He had, I think it was 6 weeks off, and then he tried to go back. He had 6 weeks also paid for by his work, occupational therapy, and they said he needed longer, and he didn't get longer. They didn't want to give him any longer because they said I suppose he was missing work to go to that, and they wanted him back in work. They didn't, and there was no tie-up. The whole mental health thing didn't happen. He didn't get the help he needed, really, at that point.
There wasn't a whole lot of support there.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was like, well, you have to be okay because you're a teacher. So what we're going to do now is downgrade you from head of department to try and help you. But he took it as knocked his confidence a bit. Then he went back, but not for long. And then he suddenly he just quit. And I was like, what are you doing? Why would you suddenly quit working? Because you could actually stay off work for a bit. But he said, no, I'm just letting everyone down. I don't want to be paid for not being there. I'm just going to stop. And so it was 2 months of me trying to pay the bills and trying to sort everything out. And at that point, he really spiraled right down because he started drinking in the day. He started drinking more and more. He would. I then said, I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. One night, he was cooking dinner. He always cooked. He was always trying to make that okay, trying to make the family unit okay. And he'd sat the children down for some food, and he left the gas on. And I said, "You've left the gas on?" He said, "No, I haven't." Turned the gas off, and so we ended up in an argument over that. And I walked out the house, and I took the children with me, and I went to a neighbour, and I called my dad, and he came and he took me and the children, all our stuff, and back to his. And I said, I've had enough. You sort yourself out, or I'm not coming back. But and I decided I'm not talking to you for. It was very hard. I literally had to say I'm going to not look at my phone, not talk to you. And he tried to then pick the children up from school, and he was. I told the school that they went to take. They rang me and said he's walking. We can see him coming up now. He tried to say that they had a dentist appointment so he could see them, and the school had said, They rang me, said he's saying that you've got a dentist appointment. I said no, he hasn't. So, but then they said we can see him coming. He's not in a fit state to take the children. We won't be sending them. But can you get here? So I got there. Then the police came and they took him back to our house and sat in the drive with him and talked to him. And I wish I could find, because he's written all about it. He wrote from his side of the story what he.
Oh really?
I don't know if I can find it, I can read it to you. From his point of view, what happened that day, and it was quite amazing.
So was this from a journal? Did he keep like a journal?
Yeah, he did. And so from my point of view, I just not let him pick up the children. I'll see if I can find it because it is really good.
Were you aware he was writing these?
Not completely.
Okay.
He did tell me that I could read them, and I didn't at the time. This is hitting rock bottom, basically, he said. After Lucy gave up her contract on our last home, and after a spell of sofa surfing, returning to mum's and scraping money together for B&Bs, I was eventually referred to the housing association called Genesis, and they gave me a 5-bedroom shared house before I'd been too proud to even go to the job centre, let alone claim benefits. So I was surviving on the money that Mum and Lucy, and in my first week in this house, I was hospitalised and I hadn't fed myself properly. Every penny I'd spent on vodka, and I became too paranoid to leave my room. And in the space of my residency there, just over a year, I had health issues and many hospital visits. In hindsight, I feel sad at the pride I once had and the unshakable love I have for my babies. They weren't foremost in my mind when I picked up that bottle or two every day, and that I wished my life away. Mine that felt replaceable, selfish, self-centered, and neglect of my responsibilities to others. This is when he went to collect the children from the school. He said, I'll find the other half of it. He said, "This is looking back, I feel a bloody idiot. Had I even been successful in getting an afternoon with Isaac, I was in no fit state, physically or emotionally, and to have done what was best for him. And at worst, I would have been putting him at risk, and this gives me gut-wrenching sickness of how illogical those first few hours were." And he's written so much, but I thought at the time.
So he wrote this the day after he went to attempt to pick them up from school, did he?
Yeah, he wrote it a few little while after that.
Yeah.
I would say, and he's just written so much about everything that happened.
Do you find it difficult to read all these back?
I wish I'd read it before, because it all makes more sense, and I can see how much pain he was in, really.
Yeah.
Emotionally and physically, and also how much he...
Did he get very good at hiding it?
He was really good at hiding it.
Yeah.
But not to me in the end. I knew when he'd had a drink, I knew if he'd whatever he'd done, but he would tell me as well, because we went through all of this stuff that was absolutely horrendous. I was so angry with him at that point when I had said I cannot be with you, I need to go to my dad. I went to my dad's for 3 months, but I couldn't have him on the street, so we lost the contract for this house. Anyway, I went over, I cleaned the house. He literally had nowhere to go. He went to his mum's for possibly one night. He wouldn't go. He didn't want to be there. He wanted to be with us. So he was trying to get to us. Like, I need to see my children. You're not letting me see them. And I said, you need to get better. And I paid for him to stay in hostels. I paid for him to stay in hotels. My mum paid for him. We tried to get him the help. We tried to. I couldn't find any help. We eventually found Turning Point, and he went, but he had nowhere to live, and I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't move him into my dad's because my dad would not really allow that. Yeah. So I then found a house in Kesgrave. I moved into Kesgrave, and I wanted it. The 5-bedroom house that he moved into, which was a not dry house with 5 other people he made really good friends with, somebody called Phil and Richie, and there was a couple of other people there, and I think there was 3 alcoholics and 2 drug addicts, and all of the alcoholics have died. Dan was the last one. Phil died 3 years ago. Richie died 4 years ago, and now Dan. And the other two are still alive, but the alcohol definitely seems to kill more people.
Which is interesting, really, because it's looked at so differently in society, isn't it?
Yeah, it's accepted. Alcohol's accepted, and drugs are
which
not.
Is crazy.
But actually, they're so similar. It doesn't have.
You were trying to get Dan all this support.
Yeah.
Was you seeking any support or help for yourself while all this was going on?
I found Iceni helped me because they helped the families of the addicts. They didn't really manage to help Dan because he wouldn't engage with them, because he didn't want to cross the two over. He didn't want to be there with us as well. And it was AA that actually helped Dan the most, because Phil had introduced him to AA when he went into that house where they all just basically paid for each other to get drunk and do whatever. They'd sit in the lounge and then he would walk up to my house. I said, "I'm not coming." I found it quite difficult trying to keep that boundary in place where he's not allowed to drink. He could come in without the drink.
Must have been very difficult for you as well, because you must have had so many mixed emotions. Because
I did love him. This was the problem. I still loved him, but I couldn't.
You didn't only have yourself to think about as well. You had the children, but also you were probably thinking of him as well, but not knowing what to do.
I was trying to think, well, how can I look after him and the children, and try and also pay for all the bills, because we were renting. I was renting that house because I just had to get out of my dad's house. And I was really trying to do everything, and he was a complete mess at that point. And because of trying to pick up the children from school, they had then called social services, who then had got heavily involved at that point, and that was horrendous because they didn't actually really help the situation. Their theory was, well, you just Dan can't be in the children's lives because he's alcoholic, but he's still the father, so he's got parental rights, so you have to let him see the children. But equally, I was struggling because I still loved Dan and I wanted to help him, and and everyone around's going, well, you just need to cut him off. It's that simple. It's not that simple. No,
you can't just turn your feelings off as well. And when you see someone struggling that you care about the most, it's even more when you want to help them as well, isn't it? But there must be a part where you realise that you can't. When was the part where
I stopped pouring the alcohol away? I thought, I need to let him deal with this, and he needs to realise. It was actually when I stopped pouring it away and stopped trying to stop him that he spiralled down a bit more, but he realised he had a problem at that point more.
But when we spoke on the phone, you said that he didn't realise how much of it. Is that what you said? You didn't realise?
He didn't realise. I don't think the
extent of the problem.
Yeah, he didn't, and he would really. He didn't realise until that point. He did. Then he's always in a bit of denial, I think. A lot of the time.
I think so.
He never 100% got better. Even going to the hospital, he said to them, "But I was cutting down. I don't understand why I've."
Yeah, I think that's a coping mechanism for some people's complete denial, isn't it? And I think that's a scary place to be.
But
when did he find out he had cirrhosis of the liver?
It was a year ago. Yeah. So we after this traumatic whole experience of the social worker saying, he can see the children, okay, fine, he has to see the children because he's got parental rights, you can see them in the children's centre, he can see them, I'd just see him anyway, but it was, like, see him outside in without drink. He did everything they told him to do, he jumped through all the hoops, but they mostly came to me, you have to do this parenting course, you have to do that parenting course, you need to go on the freedom program. I did that 3 times. I did, and that was good. I did like the courses, but it did fill up my life with a lot of stuff, and it didn't really help him, because I think they should have gone to him and said, you're the one that needs the help, so we're going to help you, and just they didn't need to help me, they just need to leave me alone with the children to get on with my own and make sure that he got all the help, but they didn't. So them telling me to go on all these courses, it was almost like they were putting it all on me and not sorting him out.
I've dealt with them myself recently, and I feel a bit let down by them personally, and I don't want to speak for you, but I get the feeling you feel the same.
I do think that they put a lot on. They don't help the person that needs the help. They try and fix the people around that person, and that's not fair. That doesn't work. It doesn't work in abusive relationships either. It doesn't. I think yes, do the freedom program, but I think if they stepped back away from the family that needs, well, they obviously need a bit of support, but they could help the person that's causing the issue in the first place, and then they wouldn't have the issue with the family.
No,
they wouldn't. They'd be able to sort that out. I don't understand why they haven't got more in place to do that. So they told Dan that he should go on a course. You go and do the Caring Dads course. Yeah. And he didn't do it, and they didn't follow it up. Yeah. And it's things like that. He did later on. He did tons, but at that point when he needed the help, he wasn't. They were just coming to me saying, "You need to do this. You need to do that." And my mum said, like, it's not, you haven't got the problem. He's the one that's alcoholic, so why are they doing this? Yeah,
and I think that is the power of you doing this sort of thing by talking about it, because I think a lot of people who have been in the same boat will find comfort in that, because I know a lot of people that have dealt with it, and I feel exactly the same way as what you do. It's very frustrating, frustrating.
And you feel like you're being punished for something that because you're asking them to help, you're asking them to actually help the person really, and they don't seem to do that, and I think that's where it needs to change. But
can I ask you, and this would be a tough question, you don't have to answer anything, but there'd have been a time where you knew you were going to lose him.
Yeah.
Did he know he'd gone too far, and how did you cope as a family as that?
It was difficult because even though we knew, we still didn't believe it. So there's that whole, you just don't think about that. But also we didn't know when. So it was like, okay, so you've got cirrhosis. So, and I Googled everything, looked up what that means, and still didn't really take that in. He'd said he didn't want a liver transplant. He said, I've done this to myself, I don't want a liver transplant. We'd gone through a lot at that point. We'd moved. He had a fit. It was just horrendous. He was fitting a lot. He was drinking to stop fitting, and then fitting when he cut down. He had alcohol-induced epilepsy, I suppose it was. So he was just. Then.
That must have been so scary for you.
It was so. The most scary one was in the car, and he fell down the side of the seatbelt, and I couldn't get him out, and I was shouting to somebody who was nearby, can you ring an ambulance? And they rang the ambulance, and then he started turning blue, and I thought I'd lose him then. That was 5-6 years ago, and he went to rehab. Actually, I think it was after rehab, but he went to rehab on one of the fits where he'd broken his hip. He shattered all his hip, and his bones were being eaten away by the alcohol. That was horrendous, and he then was bad enough to go to rehab. So that at that point he did go, and I felt that was a massive. He said to me, I don't want to go to rehab because I'll lose you. You'll go off with someone else. You'll leave. And I said, if you don't go to rehab, you will lose me. I've had enough. Yeah. So he did go, thankfully, and he actually wrote, because I had to let him go himself. I had to say, you have to go. I took him to the train station, but that was it. He had to get the train, he had to get up, and he was living in that house at that point.
Was you aware by then that he needed to do it for himself and not anyone else? Yeah.
And he said, I'll read it to you, because he said, it's taken 2 days to pick up this book and start logging how I feel, what I've been doing, and what I see as the road ahead. The scary thing I find about committing thoughts and feelings to paper is they somehow become more real than words exchanged in passing conversation. When reality hits, it kicks you hard in the bollocks. Somehow, on day 1, Wednesday, I didn't cry at all. The rules and routines overwhelmed every bit of my brain power. I had left after what felt like an epic train journey from Ipswich. I'd been late getting up, late packing, late to the station. I don't do late for anything unless I am A, pissed, or B, have no intention of doing whatever it is. I'm late and I'll use the old classic, oh well, I've missed it now excuse, and put it off for another day. Wednesday was a mix of both. I had told my partner, my mum, and my equally wrecked housemates that I was going. I'd given them all my itinerary. I may well have blagged and bullshitted my way out of coming to Portsmouth that day. The journey was tedious, and my suitcase, which seemed to weigh a ton, like it was dragging me back to the sanctuary of my dining room and hope-free existence in Ipswich. Every time I thought me to get on an escalator or the rail lines, or took a stumble as I crossed the road with my suitcase dragging it like a child on a shopping trip, I really didn't have any interest in chucking its stroppy bulk into the next onto the floor to make the journey tolerable. I had also, in my wisdom, packed half a bottle of vodka and 2-litre Pepsi to mix in with it. In my stupidity, however, I'd forgotten that the other people were on the train and they have eyes and nosy. So not once on my entire journey did I find a safe place to get my cocktail so I could appear to be drinking like a normal, if somewhat caffeined up person. By this time I had reached Anna, which was the rehab place. I'd resigned myself into saying goodbye to Glenn's without as much of a farewell gulp. The annoying, beautiful student who was part-time worker she had the last drop of my poison out of my bag faster than I could have wrestled it to the ground. Bye-bye vodka, it was shit knowing you. Yeah. Before I knew it, a definitive date that had been funded and I'd been shipped off to my treatment centre. My loving, affectionate and sentimental side made grand plans for me to ease the pain of leaving behind my Lucy, long-suffering girlfriend, and my 2 children. On this perfect family man list, there were some of the following gestures and actions that I would take. I'd write generic letters of apologies, love and prayer for her so she could keep it by her bedside and read it each night, hopefully in bed alone. Well-intentioned, heartfelt note wishing her strength and safety, but underpinned with the subtext of please don't leave me and find someone else. I'm gone. Someone better. Selfish, I know.
That's very powerful.
Yeah. And then,
how long was he in that rehab for?
He was in 3 months, and he should have done another 3 months or 9 months. He should have done he should have done 9 months, I think, but he wouldn't do it because he was desperate to come back to the children and me. He didn't want us. He was terrified of losing us. Yeah,
and his fears are probably the fear is what most people drink on. I think we've all got fears and insecurities and anxieties of different forms, and I think that's what a lot of people drink on. Yeah. It's very, very sad. He's obviously a very intelligent man as well. He's just got the disease got him at the end, and
got too much.
And it doesn't discriminate. The disease he was a teacher. And there's all sorts of people.
He knew what he was doing. The rehab changed him, and it meant that our relationship was better.
Yeah.
So although he didn't stop drinking, he came out. He actually, I think he drank 4 days after leaving rehab.
Really?
It didn't last long, but he was a different person. He knew who he was. He knew who we were, and he had realised a lot of things that he was not doing right, I suppose. He started treating everybody around him a lot better. He started
so it helped him in a way, just didn't help him enough to stop. It's so interesting hearing, because we have had addicts and people that have been alcoholics and that come on and speak, but it's so important to hear your story, the other side of things really as well.
Yeah.
And
that impact on the family.
Definitely, and it just puts into perspective what people put there. Like me myself, I'm recovering alcoholic and addict and what I put my family through. So hearing your story gives me a hope to carry on going on the straight path. Do you know what I mean? So, what support are you? I've spoke to you, I know, but for our listeners that are listening and people that are in a similar situation to you, whatever stage they are at in their relationship with this, or grieving like you are.
Iceni definitely helped me in just going to have counselling and talking. The only problem is that at some stages I felt I couldn't open up completely because otherwise I'd get him in trouble and I'd get social care trying to take children away and stuff, and that's not the answer to everything. And I think now I can say everything and say what I like, and nothing can change.
Weight off your shoulders in a way, like that, where you can open up a bit.
And I did after he'd been to rehab. After he'd come out of rehab, he was so much better.
Yeah.
And he came over to here, and we lived like quite a few years of. Although he'd drink, he wasn't as bad. He would always think about what he was doing, think about what he's saying, and he would try, and he'd always try to be better. And we didn't end anything on arguments. We always talked through everything. So he talked through what happened before, and he was angry, and he wrote about why he'd gone there in the first place, why he'd started drinking, why he what he was going to do. Anyway, then he got ill. That's then the next step. He got so ill that he couldn't tolerate a lot of the alcohol, so even if he would try it, he didn't do it. And he got diagnosed with pancreatitis. Then his pancreas suddenly stopped working and he started having to creon. All the health issues started building up, so all of his organs were failing, obviously, but over a long period of time. It's like a very slow process of death, really. I think watching, and he gave up because he was like, well, they can't do anything for me, so what's the point? They said he needs a liver transplant eventually, but we never really got to that point where they had sorted anything out. He was under the liver specialist and he was having appointments. COVID happened and that put everything back.
It's almost like the slowest form of suicide.
Yeah, definitely a slow form of suicide. He was meant to live longer, and when we found out he had the cirrhosis, they still never said that he would die at that point. So other than us finding out and the way he felt, he didn't think he was going to live anyway. But
do you mind me saying, when we spoke on the phone, you said you walked in one time and he was yellow, wasn't he?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He started going yellow, and then he'd have periods of going yellow but then coming back to a normal.
Did that make you think he was getting better?
He was in hospital every single month in 2021, I think it might have been. And then this year he said, I can't do it anymore, I cannot go back into hospital. And I found this morning he'd written the one thing he'd written this year, and I was like, that makes sense now, because he said he'd got into hospital, so this is January this year, day 6 in the Big Brother house. Well, not quite. For the umpteenth time, and in the last decade, I find myself in a not so strange surrounding, but a new cast of broken characters. Ipswich Hospital has become a seasonal retreat for me so often now. They are considering naming their lost property and causes department after me. Lost cause. When the ambulance staff who taxied me through A&E to the temporary bay ask how my son and daughter are, or the ladies in the assessment unit almost seem to be passing me and nods to each other, I told you so, to one another. And I know I've arrived to my broken home, Dan, when he signed it on the and it just became too much, I suppose. Like, he would go onto a drip, he'd go there for a week or two, he'd come out and he'd be better again, and then he would start going back down again. And it wasn't just alcohol, that he would have paracetamol and ibuprofen, and he would take those quite a lot. Too much. I'd say, well, where's the packet of ibuprofen? He'd had the whole lot. He would just be using those to get by, and because he was in so much pain.
Yeah.
And
he had a real effect on the staff at the hospital as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
Like, because of what a nice man he was and how close you lot was as a family, and that it really affected him in a way it hadn't before, didn't it?
They had to have counselling afterwards.
Some of them had to have time off work as well, didn't they? Because it affected him so much.
Because he was such a nice. He loved all the nurses.
Yeah.
he had a way with people that they just liked him.
Yeah.
Like, if anyone he met, he could actually, he'd make them laugh. I suppose he would always make people laugh.
You can tell that his sense of humour just in what you've written, what you've read out in his writing.
Yeah, he would just always be trying to make everyone laugh. He'd do that to children all the time, and I think they missed that sense of humour in some way.
Yeah.
And it was very hard at the end. Watching him die slowly was just horrendous.
Yeah.
I called the ambulance twice. He refused to go twice because his mental health wasn't good at all. It was bad. He didn't value his own life, really. He didn't think that he was worthy of living. He thought that he'd done it to himself, so why? And that he was a waste of space and he shouldn't be here, and he was taking up the resources of the hospital. And sometimes he was told that by people. I think that's the worst thing. You know, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to yourself? You're just... So he...
With you as well, there doesn't seem to be any anger there. There seems to be a real understanding of his disease.
Yeah,
Was there at any point, or is there now? Does it come?
I don't feel angry. I feel sad.
Yeah.
That he lost that. He wanted to get better, and the summer he said to me, I don't want to die. I want to live, and I want to sort out everything. I want to be here and watch my children grow up. I want to see them. Like my daughter get married. I want to be able to be here. And he said, I'm so sorry, and I didn't mean this to happen, and I never want to hurt you. And I've got like voice clips from when he was in hospital, sending me voice clips saying, and he sounds so weak, and he said, I really love you, you're my world, I want you to be okay. And
it just really shows the power of what it can do.
Yeah. I think just seeing someone go through that, and I just thought there is no way that if someone has that choice they would do this to themselves. They just wouldn't. People are meant to live, I suppose. They're meant to be okay. If they just wouldn't do that. They wouldn't kill themselves basically in that way, because it's not it's so slow, and it's so painful, and it's so painful to watch them. And I think on that, I was talking to Dan. I was at the hospital. He became incontinent. I was cleaning him, I was washing him, dressing him, I was talking to him, I was trying to do everything with the children, I was trying to get him to be okay. I thought if he went into hospital they would give him longer. I suppose I thought they'd put him on a drip and he'd be okay and he'd come out. And there was one occasion he was upstairs and he was being sick. I went upstairs and there was blood everywhere. He'd thrown up tons of blood, and I called the ambulance. They came. They said he was in stage 3 kidney failure. So they quickly got him into hospital, and he recovered. He came out, and that's what I thought would happen this time. But he refused to go to the hospital when they first came. So 2 ambulances. Then he agreed to see the doctor, and it was only because I'd phoned the doctor. I said, "Can you come to the house, please, and see him?" And they said, "No, we can't do that." I was telling him, I was trying to say he can't walk, he can't he needs to be on PIP, so he was on job seekers allowance at one point, and I was like, this is ridiculous, you can't work like this, we need to get you onto something. So I applied for PIP, and so you send off all the information, but because he's alcoholic, they're like, they pretty much just said no, he's not entitled to PIP. But right, okay, so I appealed it, and basically I just sent a letter saying if you don't do anything and he dies, then I'll take it further. So they said, we got a letter back saying okay, so they put him on PIP at the lowest rate, and I thought, there's people walking around on PIP that were going to work and they're fine, and how can he not be on that? So that was another definite failing in the system. I want to ask why he was not given that in the first place, why he was on the lowest rate, and what their reasoning behind that was, and why he just didn't get the help. But why, when I rang adult social care several times and begged them to come in and help, because he needed care, he needed somebody to help him wash, he couldn't walk from the very far at all, and he was in a lot of pain by that point, and they just didn't do anything. Oh no, he's fine. That's not good enough. Sounds okay on the phone, so that's all right. And I then had rang, you need to see him, and eventually they agreed they were going to see him. They were coming, I think it was like the 18th or something, they were coming. It was too late, he was in hospital by then.
Well, I hope you get the answers that you deserve, and I hope that at least they learn from this and they don't make the same mistakes.
I think even on the liver specialist, I don't understand why he had an appointment over the phone and not in person. That was the last liver specialist appointment he had, was talking on the phone and telling them that he's not that yellow. So the report says not that yellow, he says it's okay, so he's okay. And actually knows
he clearly wasn't, and that's something they need to learn from.
And he's not. And then he spoke to me. He was really lovely. He struggled his liver as the cirrhosis got, where the toxins build up in the brain, and he wasn't completely. He didn't really understand what was going on around him all the time, but he was talking to me saying and I was trying to wash and dress him, and he was frustrated, and he was trying to get help from. He didn't want me doing it all the time. Pressed the buzzer once, and this nurse comes in and says, "Well, what's wrong? What do you want?" And he said, "I just need to. I need some help." And she said, "Well, can't you do it yourself?" And I was thinking, if he could do it himself, he would do it. And I just ended up saying, "Well, I'll just do it. I'll just do it." And actually, bank holiday weekend was not good because.
Frustrating.
But he really tried to make sure we were all okay by trying to put everything in our name, and the problem was we didn't get married, and I wouldn't marry him unless he'd stopped drinking, and she wasn't gonna have. So we talked about that. We talked about actually getting married at one point. We talked about it with Amelie, and she said she wanted to be a bridesmaid and she was always saying, "Are you and Daddy going to get married?" And we'd have a conversation between us. We also had the conversation, what happens when he dies? Is he going to does he want to be buried or cremated? And he said cremated. And Isaac, our son, asked him all the questions because he said, "What do I do? So when's Daddy going to die?" I said, I don't know. I think we thought he had till about 45-ish. I knew actually he didn't. I knew 6 months possibly, if that. I'd even said to other people, I don't think he's going to live. I don't know, he's not. But then it was continuing going on, thought, well, maybe he will. And so I doubted myself, but looking back I knew.
Sounds like a roller coaster.
I just didn't.
And with the kids and that involved is heartbreaking. So.
Yeah, and the intensive care unit was the worst, definitely. I think just them saying, right, we've had to put him on a ventilator because he couldn't breathe properly. But 1 minute he was fine, next minute it was like, I went yesterday to ask they gave me some of the notes, and they went through the notes with me and what happened because I hadn't heard from him on the Monday. I said, "What's wrong?" And I rang them and they said nothing. There's all his levels and everything he'd actually picked up. He was fine. And then suddenly on the Tuesday they ventilated him, and then they said he'll come off the breathing machine, we'll get him better, we'll get him down to ward, fine. Just ventilated, nothing else, all the organs are not being supported, that's fine. And then gradually he went downhill, and they keep a diary in the hospital, they keep like a notebook which tells you how that they write what they felt that day. So and they'd said that he was okay, he was it's all written to him, so if he came round after it all, he'd be able to read back through it all, so it's aimed at him being able to see what happened to him. But yeah, and on there it's like, oh, you're doing well today, you're absorbing the feed that we've put in you, we've like and then to suddenly not be okay, it was quite a shock, I think, it was a shock to all the staff that were there, because they thought he'd be okay, and they were so desperately trying to save him, because he's got me and the children. And they said to me, usually somebody goes in, they get ventilated, then they come off the ventilator and they're okay, or they die, like, and there's no up down. With Dan it was like 1 minute okay, 1 minute not, next minute okay, and it was so on the edge all the time.
Yeah, he was obviously fighter.
And then she couldn't anymore, and they said we have to turn off the machine, and I had to tell the children, and that was the hardest hardest thing, but I just couldn't, I was in shock, I think, just total disbelief that any of that had happened. So I sat down with them and told them, and with my family, the rest of it, we just tried to tell them that he's not come back. Obviously then went to turn the machines off, and they said, actually we can't turn the machines off, he's an organ donor, he's going to donate everything. It was what? Okay, we'll do it Monday. So we had another 2 days of waiting and I didn't know they gave him units of blood and things to prepare him for the next bit, and it was just so surreal, and I still actually can't believe he's not here. I just expect to hear from him.
Yeah, it must be very difficult, and I'll just again take my hat off to you for wanting to spread as much awareness and prevent other people going through what you have and are still going through, for you and the children. I think you're very, very brave. Is there anything else you want to add?
I think the only thing is you just have no choice but to carry on, and I think talking about the mental health side of it all, talking about addiction and it does help, because it's not.
And finding people that are in the same situation as you, and talking to them. We spoke on the phone, and you're doing stuff like that at the minute, aren't you? And
I think, and that is not, so addiction doesn't define the person. It doesn't go, oh, that person's just a waste of space, because they actually have they have a life as well. And each person that you come across has a life, and they have, and I think people need to realise that. I think there should be more help, and there should be more compassion for people that are in that situation. And I think if Daniel had got help earlier, I think he could have been helped, he could have been saved from this, but I think it was too late by the time he wanted to help, which pretty much was this year. So it was then too late to be able to do anything. He was too ill for a liver transplant. If they had a liver to transplant, he couldn't have taken it. He was too ill. He was too ill for dialysis. He was too ill for all sorts of stuff. Just so much damage done by that.
What advice would you give to anyone in a similar sort of boat?
Definitely say don't give up. Don't just to go and get the help, but equally the family, I think, need the support. I didn't know NACOA existed until 3-4 months before Dan died. That's the National Association of Children of Alcoholics, And that one, I think that we should have known that existed. We were never told of the help that we could have got, and so I was just didn't know where to turn really. I didn't know who I could talk to. I also found the online support groups for like families of people, and also the one like wives of addicts, things like that definitely helped. That because they understood, and a lot of the time they didn't. That kind of thing I'd say helps, but also I think for the person that's going through the addiction, I think if Dan had known, if he could have just stayed at rehab, that would have been better. And also how people can hide it quite easily. He could hide how he was, he could hide how much he drank, he could make people think he was okay, and even in rehab he made the people in rehab think he was okay, because it was like a challenge to him. He wanted them to think he was okay, so they would let him out and he could complete the programme, get the award thing and leave and say, yes, I've done it. But I wish that they had realised what he was doing, because if they'd seen that actually that he was keeping everything inside, pretending he was okay on the outside, and they thought he was okay, except for one counsellor could see right through him, and he said that one counsellor, he said if he'd actually worked with me properly and if he'd continued working with him, and he was the only one that said you need longer, whereas everyone else in there said you don't, you're fine, you're doing really well, you're alright, you can go. Whereas that counsellor said you're not okay, you're not gonna, you will go out and you will relapse, and that's exactly what happened. He said if there were more people in there that knew that that couldn't be manipulated, and now actually I think I couldn't be. I think actually I'll probably go and help people.
With addicts, so they're master manipulators. And that is
deception, isn't it?
Yeah, very good at it. Dan was very good at manipulation, and except with me, just couldn't do it. I just see right through him and go, really? I don't think so.
Listen, I think you're so brave, and I want to thank you so much for coming on and telling your story, and I think that will help so many others. And I just want you to know as well that you're not alone.
Thank you.
This, and we'll be here to support you whenever you want it and need it, for as long as you need it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for being so honest and sharing.
Thank you. I wish Dan had found you lot in the first place.
Oh,
anyway. That's another thing.
So
just look for what's there.
Yeah, that's it.
Definitely.